So before we get to the scale, so much of entrepreneurship is, perceptions of feasibility and desirability. Is this something I can do? So if I could, before we get to the scale part, Andy, if you could reflect, as your dad mentioned, 96 is right when, you're about to be born. Can you reflect a little bit on your early memories of the firm and how it was going, and specifically on having, an entrepreneurial dad? Because a lot of people get into entrepreneurship, there may have been someone in their family that made it seem like, yes, this is something I could do. So if you reflect a little bit on the early memories of the firm and being raised by such an entrepreneurial father.
Sure. Two very, very quick stories. One of the things when my father was starting the firm, and my brother and I were, young kids, I don't know, 7 and 8, something like that, let's say. The mail used to get delivered on Saturdays in New York City. And so every Saturday we would go down to the office with him, and he'd check out the mail for a couple hours, maybe 2 hours or something. And we'd, break the photocopier or do something, like that. So anyway, we're going down one of these Saturday mornings, and my father goes, "Oh, look, there are all these fire engines. I guess there's a building on fire or something." So that was sort of exciting to see until he discovered it was his building. And so lo and behold, the building was on fire. And we went home, and then he came back and tried to salvage whatever water damage there'd been and that sort of thing. My father, I guess early memories, to go back to that, Bruce, is just, here was a guy who just loved his work. And he really looked forward to going to work every day of his life. And that was a great role model to have. I think a lot of people don't love their work and don't love going to work every day. And to look at someone who just, loved what he was doing so much was a great, great role model to have.
Oh, and that passion is so important. And that idea that if you, love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. Can you talk about a bit from when you first got in the company, any background, and then that transition period from, being brought into the company to taking on the leadership role? How did you prepare for it, and how did it all go?
Yeah, sure. I was about 30 years old when I joined DCI. I had sort of worked for two service-related firms, so it was a similar type of business, but just a different end of the market. And so around Thanksgiving, my dad and I are going for a walk, and he was trying to figure out what he did next with DCI, and he was thinking about selling. He was thinking about trying to bring in someone else. I think this was after Manny had passed away, and he was really trying to figure out a solution to this. And I was, at the same time, had gotten about as far as I was going to go within this small entrepreneurial firm that I was working in, and a fundraising firm. It was run by two partners. They had run it together for 20 years, and there was sort of nowhere left for me to go. So, we were both sort of struggling with what we should do. And so my dad brings up and he goes, "Well, why don't you take over DCI?" I got to tell you, in my 30 years, I had never, ever thought of that. Never, ever considered that. So it was like a completely new idea to me. And I said, "Well, that's your firm." And he said, "Yeah, but you can do whatever you want with it." And it's like a big light bulb goes off in my head. This is sort of interesting. This is sort of attractive to me. I don't, because I one of the things I toyed with was, here I'm 30 years old. I could start my own firm and do my own thing. But here was this opportunity to take something that existed and was going pretty well and working pretty well. So we talked it over for a couple of months, went back and forth, and finally decided that, yes, this is a good idea. I will come into DCI, and I'm going to start as an account executive, sort of start at the bottom. I think there were 8 people working at DCI at the time, and sort of learn the business. At the time, I was then starting a new job. My wife and I had just bought a new house, and we had a new child on the way. So I was reading the Wall Street Journal at some point, and there was an article about the most stressful moments in someone's life, and they were a new home, a new job, and a new child. And I was experiencing them all at exactly the same time. So anyway, I went to work, and the first year was was kind of I don't say disaster, but was concerning because, I sort of jumped right into the pool. There was absolutely no training program at DCI. It was sort of like, here's your desk, here's your phone, go do whatever it is that we do. And, there was no training going on. So I was immediately given 3 clients, which is what an account executive did. And within 3 months, I'd lost 2 of the 3. So I was not off to a great start. At the same time, a recession hit and our revenue started going down pretty strongly.
Worst year we ever had.
Yes. We've been around for 54 years. There's 1 year that we were unprofitable. It was the year I started. So I remember my wife saying to me one night, she said, Andy, do you think this was a good idea? And, I really had to think about it, but we stuck it out and it ended up being a very good choice. As Ted mentioned, we have built up from the 8 people when I started to about 54 people today. Some of them are here tonight, actually, which is nice. We have built a reputation as the leader in marketing places. And we've been profitable for 22 of the 23 years that I've been involved in the firm. So just summing up sort of my first year, towards the end of the first year, I was at a cocktail party and there was someone else who both Ted and I knew, and this guy pulled me aside and said, so how's it going? And I said, well, it seems to be going okay. I'm losing lots of clients, but once you get past that, it seems to be going okay. And he goes to me, have you and your dad had an argument yet? I think I'd been at DCI for about 6 months. And I said, we haven't. He said, then you're never going to have an argument. And it really was true. So we worked together for, 20 years, 19 years, something like that. And I think we never had an argument because my father, unlike some entrepreneurs, he was ready to let go. And he, basically said, listen, I'm going to advise you. Any question you bring to me, I'll give you my best advice. I'll give you my best thinking, but the decision is yours. And I always appreciated his willingness to basically let me succeed or fail. And thank goodness it ended up being a success.
Great.
I want to add, if I can, just one word. The reason I did that, one of the main reasons, and I think this is important for any entrepreneur, is that I found, to my surprise, because I'd never done it before, that the selling part of the job was what I really loved. I loved being in a client's shoes and trying to think out what the client would want and then speaking, in a sense, for him or her. And so Andy could take over the running of the business, and I continued in the part I loved best. And that was one of the reasons I think we worked out well, because that was something I loved, and the running of a firm was something I didn't love at all. I would also just say that I think the extreme conservatism, which I had, and I saw it as a little tiny boutique firm. I didn't see at all the vision of what could be done with it. And I think, Andy, you might just say a word about how we ever went, because at the time I didn't believe it was possible, from 8 people to 54 people.
We have our method of growth. There are different ways you can grow. You can try to just simply get more clients, and eventually you're going to run out of countries and cities that can hire you, but that's one way to grow. Another way to grow is you can go into new industries. You could go into real estate. You could represent hotels. You could do things that are logically related to place marketing. We didn't do either of those things. We grew by offering a greater suite of services to our clients. So rather than just simply getting more clients, we said, what can we do for these clients that needs that they have that go beyond what we're doing for them already? So originally when I started, we might have offered 3 or 4 different types of services that people could buy. Now we offer maybe 15 or 20. And so the goal was to gain a larger share of existing client than simply to gain more clients. And we've proven very successful at that.
Okay. And the whole aspect of family business within small business management, entrepreneurship is a whole nother area, and it's interesting. Very few family firms make it to the 3rd generation. I think it's less than 20%. But clearly this is
we haven't either, by the way.
Right, that's right. that's further down. But and you said your child was just born when you took over. You were born when Andy when Ted just started. So let's see what the next step is. But I wanted to go in to ask you.
Can I just interrupt just for 1 minute? There's a saying I think is very good. The first generation builds the business, The second generation makes it succeed, and the third generation ruins it.
Okay.
Sounds great. Okay.